Steve, is it really hot there? It's really hot. It's really hot here.
It's not hot in the studio.
Oh,
The
you
Triple
you have
B
a
studio.
studio now? Is that what you're calling
It's
it?
the same one we've had before with the
Oh,
bees, right?
okay. All right, you're calling. Oh, right, because you've got Bentley,
We have
Butler, and
Butler
and
and Bull.
Bull. That's right. I couldn't
Yeah.
remember the third one. This podcast is off to a great
Is it
start.
hot there?
It's very hot here.
Okay, it was
It's
damn hot outside.
it was not great. It's gross. Um, anyways, this is the Stuff Summer Says podcast with
Steve,
Steve. Steve, the other thing I've been thinking about is those wings you got us. This isn't an ad, but you got some. We had dinner together recently, and you got some bacon ranch wings.
yeah, you asked for those, and those are pretty
They were
good.
pretty good. I've
Port
been thinking
Matilda
about
American
those.
Legion. There you go. Thursday nights, the Port Matilda American Legion. It's not an ad, but they're $12 a
Like they
dozen. I
were
mean,
pretty good. Like
hey,
it was, yeah. So that was a new flavor, but it was good to see you. Good to hang out with you. It's good to sit here and hang out with you now. We have a good show, a great show. We have our second two-time guest is now officially on the books. Mark Wogenrich of the SI.com kind of Penn State, all Penn State offshoot joins. We spent a lot of time talking about James Franklin and kind of how he has handled kind of life and also like kind of how he handles current college climate, kind of what's up going on in the summer. And he teases it right at the end. So stick around all the way to the end of that interview. A very cool interview that he did for a project he's working on that I'm quite excited about. So take a listen to our interview with Mark, and then we've got some whiteout stuff, some other potpourri stuff, and then I have this week's old guy, young guy question for Steve. So go ahead. Steve, we have bad news for a friend of the podcast, Brian Tripp. He is no longer the only member of the Two Timers Club on the Stuff Summer Says podcast.
it's going to be
Because,
even worse news for when we start breaking out swag for those, like the Saturday Night Live robes or
yes,
I was gonna
something.
say they have a 5-time club.
that is
Stick with
effectively
us.
what you are in now. And for those listening in audio format, our guest this week is Mark Wogenrich, who is hanging out with us. I guess again would be the best way to say it. I I don't have particularly anything I want to pick your brain out about, but I also want to pick your brain about everything. So I hope you'll come along for the ride. Does that sound
Yeah,
good?
that sounds like an off season. Thanks for having me.
Perfect. All right, let's start there. Um, School is out. There's some football related stuff going on. But for a beat writer that covers college football and particularly Penn State, what are you writing about right now? How are you finding stories? What are you doing? What does the midst of June look like for you?
Yeah, it is like it's trying to like digging a pool in the winter. I mean, you're just trying to mine ground as much as you can. One of the things I used to love, excuse me, about working in the newspaper business is that, and then covering Joe Paterno simultaneously, is that this could go away for a while. Like from the blue-white game to the Big Ten Media Days in July, that April to July, Joe Paterno disappeared. We'd go up maybe for Live for Life when that began. A couple of times he had a little beat get together. It was an informal, off the record get together. Would do a barbecue, and we went to his house. I think once or twice. Actually, rode the blue buses to his house for dessert. Paterno made strawberry cheesecake. That was like killer. It was really good. And stuff like that was fun because it felt off season-ish. And you got to know some people. He invited some of the coaches and he invited some of the athletic department too. So that was good off-season work. And then again, we just got to get away from football. But in a digital world, in an NIL transfer portal world, even though the portal's not open now, but in a year on college football world, on a digital platform, it's still 24/7. There are still stories. So, you try to maybe go some of the evergreen things, ranked teams, 10 best, James Franklin's 10 teams ranked, that sort of thing. Um, I was just working on another piece today about just the history of the whiteout because that's such a topic. It's a huge off-season topic right now, at least that's generating some attention and engagement and traffic. And went back and looked at the dates, and I did for yeah, there has been one noon whiteout game, if you guys remember the Michigan game
Mhm.
back in 15. So that is the essence of the offseason. And then we had a media availability last week with the coaches. What's one of the really was one of the things that James Franklin does. He'll do a June availability where he not just him, but his entire staff's available. And you get about half an hour so you can bounce around. So that's really good to kind of get just off season ideas, how the coordinators are just like joining the team, how they've been ingratiating themselves with the team. How everybody, Marcus Hagans was a hugely popular assistant coach for the wide receivers, and how what he's doing this offseason. And so that kind of stuff was really good just to get to see them again in maybe a little bit of an informal setting. Otherwise, June, unless you're hardcore go at the recruiting, June can be a bit of a time to pile up that evergreen content, as we call it.
So how does that work? I mean, I think I know how that works, but how does piling up that evergreen content work? How are you what's the process of maybe working on something that you're saving for a feature later during the actual season, but I know a lot of you are working actually on it right now.
Yeah, you can repurpose things a lot of different ways. If I want to do a story, say about Julian Fleming before the season, I have a lot of background, a lot of stuff from the coaches, from their offensive coordinator, from the receivers coach, from the strength coach. I can use that now and just kind of push out maybe a little short beat, pieces of content here and there, and then actually, repurpose that and use it again to do a longer story in August when that comes around. You also try to do maybe just again try to find some of the interesting things that some there's a lot of rankings that come out now, right? So you rank the rankings, or Penn State's position groups, who are the overrated position groups, who are the underrated position groups, as ranked by somebody, by some of those services like Pro Football Focus and some of the scouts and things like that. I think there's a time to put some interesting stuff out there that you don't really necessarily get to during the season. And you can go back. Like I've done some stuff where you've gone back and talked to some former players. I'm working on an NIL piece right now, probably we're closer to the season, that I've talked to some people about just about Penn State's where it's at with NIL, which is a constantly evolving, shifting, moving target. So that's what I think to me the offseason in college football has become right now. And it is, how are you building your program? What are you doing to build your program? So when you get to August 31st, that's what the football team looks like. But how did you get there?
Makes sense.
And it seems like there's a lot of work for you in terms of forget about keeping up with more activity, keeping up with the changes, right? Whether it's the house ruling, whether it's what somebody else in NIL is doing, just to know what else is out there on the landscape of college football.
It's terrifying, is what it is. Like, again, I'll go back to the fact that college football used to end. I mean, it ended in January, and then you had a little bit of a spring like window. There was like that extra season, you know, uh, in spring football. But then again, after the blue white game, Joe Paterno goodbye till late July. I remember going to those Big Ten meetings, the media days in Chicago, and Joe Tiller, the late Joe Tiller would come in every year. I think he did this every year and say, "Oh, you guys just got me off the, fly fishing river in Wyoming to come to this," and that was his shtick every single year. But there was that kind of rite of passage, at least in football, in college football, that they could go away, they could go recruit, they could go host camps. They weren't doing. I mean, they were busy, sure, and especially now. But it's even more if you are in state college and you are covering the beat in state college. This is a busy June's a hugely busy time because they have camps every weekend. There's recruiting visits, there's official visit weekends, like 4 weekends in a row, and those camps are where players go to get noticed, and so there's a lot of that. If you're covering that window, June and December, it almost seems like are some of the busiest months,
Hmm.
strictly to cover recruiting.
You mentioned that you get to hang out with, well, hang out, that's not the right way. You get to interview and have conversations at this time of year with James Franklin and then a lot of the other coaching staff. Particularly with James Franklin, what is there any difference between June James Franklin and August or even maybe like certainly September James Franklin in the way he talks to you, the way he's presenting himself, and maybe the answers he
I don't know if
offers?
there's necessarily a difference from his end. There's more of a difference from our end in what we ask. We try to ask the off-season stuff because he won't dodge it in season, but he will let us know, hey, that's this question for the off-season. So the questions for the off-season, yeah, where are you at with NIL? Where are you at with you know, with your under, or at least what you're doing with the transfer portal, how you're handling situations in the transfer portal. Where are you at with revenue sharing? How is Penn State going to be able to be one of those teams that can share 20 to $25 million a year of revenue with players? Is that financially possible for the Penn State athletic department? What do you think about that? Do you believe in revenue sharing? Do you that sort of stuff? It gets to be more. It's more bigger picture kind of uh, kind of story. Questions, and then he'll steer it back. He'll ultimately will steer it back to football, which he did last week. And he did say, he said, from the 30,000 foot level, the big picture, yeah, these are all important, but ultimately we still have to be able to, how did he phrase it? Play man coverage, run routes or something like that, cover a kick. And then I think he said West Virginia 7 times. So, I mean, he still has, I think he still presents that in season, that in season focus quite a bit. I had him actually, I was able to get a Zoom interview with him in May, and that was primarily about NIL. He's a bit more open. I'll say when he does the Zooms, he's a bit more open. I think he'll tell you, a little bit more. Maybe he'll share a little bit more in some of those one-on-one scenes. And he also doesn't. I don't think he extends answers as much as he does in season. That if he could take a question, if he could in a press conference setting, take as few questions as possible, I think is what he's trying to do. So he'll elaborate. And if he gets an opportunity to turn a 30-second answer into 2.5 minute answer, he absolutely will take it because that reduces the number of questions he gets from 15 to 12. So maybe it's a couple less questions that he doesn't have to answer. He doesn't in Zoom interviews and in one-on-ones, he doesn't do that as much. You can get almost more into a conversation with him, and I think sometimes that's a lot better. Well, obviously, it's a lot better, and he also is he's pretty agreeable to doing that schedule. As long as you're able to do it at 7, 8 o'clock in the morning before his day gets started, he's usually pretty good about doing those things. He'll schedule a bunch of those.
Is there a difference between 2015 James Franklin and 2024 James Franklin, or the media in that stand? Going building off the previous question.
Yeah, I think there are a bunch of differences between that James Franklin and now he's 52 now, I think. I think he turned 50 in 22. And yeah, I think he's the second longest tenured coach in the Big Ten behind Kirk Ferentz. So he has more authority. I mean, he has a platform that he will use, I think, in when he needs to. He's not as I don't think he's as concentrated in some of his quotes that we used to get in 14 and 15. And you can even go back to dominate the state in the opening press conference. And some of those, the back handspring quotes, a lot of those sorts of that kind of that's dissolved a little bit into, um, I think a little quieter is not the word, but there's maybe a bit of a sense of more reserved there. And it also might just be um, the repetition of it from
Mhm.
his perspective that he's answered this stuff pretty much over and over and over again, that he has a line of thinking that he can drop back into, and it becomes like, it becomes like an answering machine to
Mhm.
him, that he can revert back, catch some. Oh, I've said this before. I've used this quote before. I'm just going to rely on that. I can't tell you how many times I've heard something, or he'll start an answer and I'll say, okay, he said that 3 years ago. It's pretty much the same answer. So part of that comes from us too. We got to start asking him about different things.
Sorry, the dogs were barking there. Do you? I don't want to like sit here and psychoanalyze James Franklin, but my next question is going to be a little psycho. Do you think some of that is performance based, or do you think more of that is general? I'm 10 years older, more knowledge, life experience based.
Yes.
Yes.
I
Okay.
think it's I
Perfect.
And
think
that's
it's
the
been
answer he would
right.
give too.
I think so, yeah. It's been performance based the whole time. There is a level, I do think that there is a level of performance in there, and that is not a negative. I'm saying that it's a false performance that he's giving, or if he's fronting somehow. I think that's generally part of his personality. There is a performance-based personality, and that's not acting, really. That's his nature. His nature is to be this outgoing, questioning, you know, very interested in what you have in what he says and what you have to say. Just not with the media, with everybody. I think there, and that comes from, you talk about psychoanalyzing. I do think that comes from his background in psychology, in in getting his master's degree, in the kind of studies that he's done. It's a lot of dealing with people. He has studied dealing with people, and I think he's studied that over as a college football coach too over the last 10 years, and he studies people really well. That's one of the great things I think that he does, is study people. He's very much a student of the players he gets, of the coaches, administrators, everybody at Penn State, anybody who comes in contact with it. And I think, in the media as well. He studies us. He knows there are certain people that with whom he can have a jokey relationship on a level, on a surface level. Certain people that it's more serious. They're younger, they're older. I think they're people he knows he can trust, and the younger ones he doesn't know as well yet. So that all comes out, and I think that all comes out in the way he treats, where he gives everybody maybe a different level of performance too. So yeah, the other part of it is, and I think I've written about this at one point, but I've said this to other people. He's in his 50s, and I think he's more comfortable with people of my generation, just personally. I think he's more comfortable living in this generation. But he's really good at dealing, and he's been that way for a decade. He's really good at dealing with people with now Gen Z, coaching millennials through Gen Z. He's really good at adapting and dealing with those kids, and that that he doesn't treat his players now the same way he treated them 10 years ago. They're different people. They they're just, yeah, generationally they're different, and he's really good at adapting to that, while also, I think, being bit more of an older soul. Like, I think if he's just going to be sitting around talking to people, I think he'd rather be talking to Gen Xers than he would be to
It's
Gen
interesting.
Zers.
Uh, it's I think about that a lot, and like that's not to like go on a side tangent here, but that's like kind of how one of the ways that like I of course certainly don't cover the team the way you cover the team, but the way we write about the team and like our Steve and I's perspective on it, I do think about that of like James Franklin 10 years ago versus James Franklin now, and I think that's a very fascinating. I think he's a very interesting figure, and that's kind of one of the reasons why like I ask like about some of those types of things. Um, let's shift gears a little bit. I want to ask about your first impressions of Andy Kotelnicki and Tom Allen. Kind of what your conversations have been like with them.
Andy, to me, is really fascinating because he's one of those coaches, and I thought of this with Micah Shrewsbury. as well. I thought Micah Shrewsbury when he was here, and I wasn't around him necessarily a lot, but I heard him talk. I was on some of the interviews and things like that. Micah Shrewsbury is a coach who could explain his offense and his, just the X's and O's of what he did on the court incredibly well for the layperson. Like I understood it when he would answer questions about his offense, about his coaching style, about what they were putting on the court. And I thought if he can do this well with just the general population, if he can really, and it wasn't like he was dumbing it down, right? He was explaining, he was really laying out, illustrating what he was doing in a very digestible way, understandable way. But if he can do that with a layperson, how good is he on the floor with his players when he can now elevate what he's saying, when he can speak at a more advanced level? And I get that sense too from Andy Kotelnicki, that he's really good with us in explaining in real terms what he likes about players. For instance, like with Drew Aller, he said that Drew has an insatiable desire to learn. And that meant to him that he spent a lot of time with Drew since arriving. They've talked a lot about the offense. Uh, Drew has asked a lot about his offense. And Andy Kotelnicki's big expression is the why. You get that from a lot of coaches now, but he's really big into that. And having Drew ask why we're doing something, and then you could hear Drew kind of pick up on that terminology as well through the blue-white game. But the way he describes football is very simple. He breaks it down very simply, and this is coming from a coach who we get this perception that he's going to be more complicated because he's going to run a lot of motions and different formations, and not necessarily maybe trick plays, but they're going to do some different kinds of creative playmaking within their offense. And he says, and what he'll tell you is, if we do that, that'll be different from what we're going to do on the base. Our base offense is really only going to be a handful of plays that pretty much everybody runs. We're just going to try to dress them up differently. So we're showing you something different, and we're going to run much the same thing. That's what I mean. Like, I think he's been really, really good at that sort of thing. Tom Allen's the ball coach. He's the defensive guy. He's the I'm going to love him up coach. And that to me, he just strikes me. There's some similarities with Brent Pry in that too, but they've kind of gone in different directions. Brent always wanted to be the head coach, so he was moving up that ladder. Tom was there for 8 years, and now you get the sense that he's really content at going to be a defensive coordinator. For how long? I don't know how long that will be. This might be it for him. Who knows? You didn't get that sense with Manny Diaz. It was always, how long is Manny going to be here? I don't know. Just listening to Tom Allen, I don't get the sense that we're asking how long is it going to be before Tom, gets another head coaching job. I think he probably was pretty satiated with that at Indiana. He's pretty happy right now, not having to deal with the agents and the parents that James Franklin has to deal with. And that might come back to him. The itch might come back, but I get that sense that this is kind of what he wants to do. And by right now, I mean, probably for multiple years.
Well, I think, and that's kind of one of the things that, like, I think the psychology of James Franklin, like, you kind of get at that. Like, we talked about this before, and Steve and I have talked about this before. You have to be built different to be a college football head coach. It's because you aren't just a head coach. You are chief fundraiser. You are borderline chief marketing officer. You are all of these other, titles. And I kind of, like, have gathered that too, just from reading and seeing. And I'm very fascinated by, like, that dichotomy again of James Franklin very much having a right-hand man in Tom Allen, the same way Brent Pry was, and to a degree, I think Manny Diaz was as well. So as a fan, that's interesting or reassuring to hear that.
It's interesting with the coordinators, just specifically those two, offense and defense. The coordinators that he has hired, I mean, promoting Brent Pry, somebody he's very familiar with. And then when Brent Pry leaves, getting Manny Diaz. He's not really familiar with them, but Manny Diaz had a track record and had been a head coach. And then hiring Tom Allen, head coach, and a guy who was familiar with these hires track. These seem to be guys that generally that James Franklin is comfortable with, either on a personal level or with their resume. And on offense, it just seems like he's been throwing stuff at the wall. We're going to try, okay, Joe Moorhead runs this really cool kind of funky offense at Fordham. Let's get that, see if it fits our personnel. He does. Joe goes on great. Well, now I've got this offensive coordinator a guy who I think is going to be really good in Ricky Ronnie, and I think he can run Joe's offense. Ricky leaves. Maybe we don't get Mike Yursich first time around, Kirk Shiraka, Mike Yursich. And then now we're going to try the ball, hand the ball to Andy Kotelnicki because he's going to bring back the explosive play, the play that we've been longing for. And it just seems like with this offensive coordinators, they've either been, in Joe's case and, in Ricky's case too, they both left for other opportunities, or they just haven't fit. He hasn't found like the comfort level necessarily that was there. And I think he's been comfortable with the defensive coordinators. I think he's far more comfortable on that side of the ball than on offense.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree there.
We talked about coaches, right, and relationships and assistant coaches. I'm curious about players, Mark, in terms of, you talked about James' comfort level with generational talking. For you as someone who's covering players now, is it any, what are the different challenges as you get older and they're staying the same age? And with NIL, like, are they any more, fair game for criticism if things go poorly because they're making decent money?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because I have the antiquated idea that they're still college kids, right? Even though they make more money, they make more than I do. A lot of them make more money than me. And so that should put them more as fair game. But I still don't see it that way. I still see them as learning, developing, that, they could be, where I am now, like they could be my kids. So that's a hard thing to get over just personally, criticizing somebody who could be your kid, that kind of, and from an age group perspective. They're much more polished, especially at the higher level. I think a player, they're much more polished now in a variety of different ways. They've done recruiting interviews since they were 15 years old. Mm-hmm. They've been stars. And they always were, but I think from covering and being covered as a recruit has accelerated so much over the last decade that it's now an industry within college football, that there's relationships built between coaches and staffs and the recruiting sites and their recruiting staffs. So, and the players, they all intermingle in this world. So they help each other in a way. Like coaches help recruiting sites with information. Recruiting sites help coaches in identifying players. Players help recruiting sites with content. Recruiting sites help players with their rankings and with getting their name out there with attention. So I think that has made the players, that sharpened them a bit. And it's given them, I think it's also made them a little more guarded. The other thing is that the players are now making their own content. And that's something that's completely different from really, that's really only a couple of years. I think that's really only 2, 3, 4 years that players have started to make their own content. And I think as that grows, and like some professional athletes, that they realize they don't necessarily need this conduit anymore, that they can reach an audience. Now we help build that audience. We can help them grow that audience because I think there's still value for them in, digital media and legacy media with the scale that those platforms have to help build that audience. But they, in some ways they can go straight. They can, this is not new, this is not new, especially on the professional side. But with college athletes, it's becoming bigger and bigger. I see it from Penn State players. Nick Dawkins, for example,
Hmm.
their center is um, he's a really good practitioner of this. At the Rose Bowl 2 years ago, I was interviewing Keandre Lambert-Smith after his touchdown catch, and he was while I was interviewing him, he had me on, I think, Instagram Live or something like that. Like he was streaming our interview, and that was a unique experience. And we're gonna be trading, I think, in those spaces for a long time to come.
I
I
am
think so
inter-
too.
I am interested in that, and I'm surprised that we haven't seen a bigger boom out of that, particularly with the NIL era at Penn State. And like, I think a lot of Penn State athletes are communications majors, have a background, or at least know how to use the tools that you're needed to do a podcast, to do, the videos, or how, get a friend that can shoot video. Um, yeah, that's. I'm interested to see that, and it's interesting to see how you guys will all react to that, and how
Yeah.
that either helps or maybe hurts you guys in long term.
It'll do both. I mean, again, if you can go straight, if you can provide your best stuff on your own channel, yeah, that hurts. I think that hurts the media providers in general, the Kelsey brothers. Obviously, they do media, of course, but they save their best stuff for their podcast, rightfully so. That's what they're selling. Bryson DeChambeau. I mean, I don't know what his YouTube channel is up to now, but I mean, he's credited. Bryson DeChambeau just won the U.S. Open. Actually credited YouTube for making him, um, a better public figure in some ways. So I think at that level of stardom, the scale is higher. And for college, there's so many college football players. It's hard for everybody to break into that market, and it's hard to just, to generate an audience outside of just being college football player. You really do have to bring something else to it. But I can definitely see that, in growing, the Penn State players, again, Nick Dawkins' podcast and some of those players, they generate some pretty good insight. So I can then follow up. If I watch a podcast, see something interesting, I can follow up with them on that. I can use that information to ask them about it. They put it out there in public, so I can ask. So that we can. There's ways to work. I think there are ways to work with that. That shouldn't be that we shouldn't put up a wall to do that. 15 years ago, I just remember people in my business saying, "Oh, the bloggers, they're idiots." When that and that was kind of our reaction. And bloggers just meant digital content in general, and now how we flipped on that.
Right. All right. I think we've taken enough of your time, but I want to end on this because I think this is a good puzzler, good way to wrap up. Because I think we already did your quick questions last time you were on. Who would be your ultimate Penn State interview? You haven't interviewed,
Who I haven't.
or maybe have, and you would like a redo, or like to ask more in depth questions about.
The ultimate that I've done was Matt Millen. Just when he went through his health issues and had the heart transplant, and he was just so unbelievably open with me. I spent like a couple days with him, and just the willingness to open up about that situation before he got the heart transplant. I went to, he had a coach's prayer session where he got, or a Bible study session with some coaches, and I attended that, and he opened that to me, which was, I mean, really kind of him, something that he didn't have to do. That was that was the interview that really, I think I took the most from. I think that I learned the most from about interviewing. I don't know if, and the ultimate one is a guy that I've interviewed a bunch of times, but never about this, and he hasn't talked about it, is Tom Bradley. And I think Tom Bradley has a phenomenal book in there. I don't know that he would ever want to write it. I don't think that that's something is interested in doing. That's a story, a personal story that he's willing to share. or wants to share. But I think Tom Bradley is now one of the more fascinating people in Penn State history, having been there his whole life, essentially. And then the scandal happens. And the thing that he wants to do with his career more than anything is to be Penn State's head coach. And for the way that didn't happen for him, and then he goes out to coach at West Virginia and UCLA and with the Steelers, but he never got to do what he wanted to do. Ultimately, what he wanted to do, that pinnacle goal, he never got to do it. And I think in there, Tom, Scrap's just such a great guy and so open about a lot of things. And I'm sure he's talked to people about that. But I just think that that would be a fascinating sit down and just say, Tom, go. Tell me about your life from, 2000 and, like 2005 on, basically, from the height of 2005 to where we are now. That to me, again, I would say he is one of the most fascinating Penn State figures currently. And it was just so wonderful to see him last year when they recognized him at one of the games. And that's when I thought of it then too. I thought so many of these people here just really don't know Tom and what he gave of himself to that program, and would love to hear his story.
I'd
That's a good one.
pre-order that book. Yeah, I'd pre-order that book. All right, we'll go.
I'd put the bid in to write that book. So.
There you go. There you go.
Ghostwrite that one for us.
Ghostwrite.
If you're listening.
All right, it is once again your chance to plug. Where can we find all of your stuff at?
And what do you got coming that's interesting
Oh
or exciting?
yeah. Also that we heard some rumors.
Oh yeah, the website it's at si.com. We're going to be rebranding a little bit, so it's going to be coming up, I think, soon. There'll be a little site rebrand in moving to the new ownership. Same site location, si.com/college/Penn State should be easy to find on their network. And I'm really looking forward to writing this. I'm still going through some of the interviews. I'm scheduled to interview Bruce Parkhill soon, but I was in Tokyo about a month ago where I interviewed Tom Hovass, who I think is just going to be really compelling Olympic story. Tom Hovass played basketball. Steve and I were in college when he played for Bruce Parkhill back in the late 80s. And he has become like a cultural figure, a basketball figure in Japan. He coached the women's national team in the 2020 Olympics. They reached the gold medal game, lost to the U.S., stunned the world. Basically, that he took the Japanese women to the gold medal game against the U.S. And now he's coaching the men's national team, the Japanese men's national team in Paris. One of the things that he told me that I was going to be writing about is how much influence Penn State basketball is kind of going to have on the Japanese men's national team. That his coaching, or his playing history with Bruce Parkhill, he's like, you'll be surprised at how much Bruce Parkhill has influenced my coaching career and what we're going to do, not stylistically or anything like that, but just the way he built a team and the way he coaches a team. He's like, there's going to be a lot of Penn State basketball in Paris with the Japanese men's team. So Penn State fans are looking for a second team to root for. I forget what their nickname is called. I have it, but the Japan men's basketball team in Tokyo.
Excited for that one. All right, Mark. Well, thank you very much for joining us. Thanks for hanging out with us and spending some time this summer with us.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. Anytime. I look forward to being a 3-timer.
Yes.
There you go.
You're a leader in the clubhouse. You're tied.
I want the koozie for that one.
We'll see what we can do. We'll see what we can do.
Pretty possible.
All right. Thanks, Mark.
Appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
I think the most interesting thing of that interview to me was not realizing, because I know that they do, but like understanding how the beat thinks about James Franklin and kind of like has seen him grow, particularly for somebody that's been on the beat for, well, you guys were in college together, so that was 40 years ago now, 35 years
Closer
ago.
every day to that number, at least. Yeah, sure.
35 years ago now, and how much has changed. So I think that's interesting. And I think the other thing that, like, even for us with this blog and podcast, that, like, was not a thing 20 years ago for sure, is the ability to sit here and do this in the summer, and for Mark to kind of always have to be on even when he is off. um, I thought that was interesting to hear about. um, yeah, I thought that was a really good perspective on kind of James Franklin and how he approaches things and how he's matured as a coach.
Yeah, I think the insights to Coach Franklin and the process, the insights to the beat, right? I think everybody that's covering the team has a plan, knows who their audience is. Wogo's audience is different from somebody who's here in State College every day, but he knows what he's got to do to deal with that and make that work for him, and does make it work for him. Um, that all came through. I think him knowing those machinations, his relationship and insights into how Coach Franklin works and the other coaches. And to that point, there's a part of me that was thinking through that. Boy, there's a lot that people don't know when they're watching the team. But at the same time, like the Tom Allen answer, he's a ball coach. Like I wanted to ask if he was the quirky old, character, and it turns out, I think he kind of said he was, right? Like not in so many ways, but he's the love him up. He's this coach. So I think there are many things that fans glean from afar that are right on, even if they're not there every day.
Right. And I think it's, I think the Penn State fan is fortunate that there's such a broad pool of beat writers that can provide that, because what Mark writes is going to be similar but different than what Audrey writes or Ben writes or or Johnny or any other beat writer that's really been on this podcast or you follow or read, um, because they all look at it differently, and I think we all have different life experiences that help us form it. And I think the other thing that I think is cool about the Penn State beat is every person on the Penn State beat that regularly covers the team, I think, knows what they do well and knows how that's different from any other person um, on the beat. So I think
Yeah, I agree.
I think that's important. Um, let's stop there before we get to the whiteout segment, and this will kind of be our first Penn State potpourri, and this is more of a congratulations slash, I'm a little biased because I used to work there, but the Mirror celebrated 150 years. The Altoona Mirror celebrated 150 years. A little bit of news, I guess Neil Riddell is going to retire, take a step back from the managing editor role, but he's still going to cover Penn State football, and I think that's an important voice. And I know Neil, I'm not just saying this because Neil hyped up the podcast, but I really do think that Penn State fans are better served, particularly in the Blair County region, because of him. So wanted to congratulate, send all the best wishes, excited for what's to come there.
Yeah, and I'll second that. I mean, I think anytime fans get experience, right, and experience that comes with a passion and has invested into that, they're better for it, right, and they're better for what Neil does. And I think as the beat changes, as the sport changes, he's seen it all, and I think it's a great way to be able to serve fans.
It's fascinating because for guys like Neil, Rich, Scarcella, who have been on the beat a little bit longer than even Wogo, some of these other people, like, I think they have lived through probably the most fascinating sets of eras of college football, because it's went from a Saturday thing to now a multi-billion dollar industry and all of this stuff that goes into it. And I think, again, like, for the Penn State fan, they're very lucky comparatively to maybe other schools that don't have as deep of a pool of writers, just because there is that level of interest in it. And I think there's a lot of good stories to be told there. So,
Yep.
Okay, moving on. I want to talk about James Franklin more, and I want to talk about James Franklin's comments about the whiteout, because I wrote about them, and also, I don't know, they've started to annoy me. So I have 2 points I want to make. The first point that I would like to make is, for lack of a better term, shut up and win the game. That's a little mean and it's a little harsh, but I don't know. And this will blend well into, like, the second question that I posed out there. And if having the whiteout at night is important, great. Like I respect that and understand that, but they're still going to show the whiteout game. There's a TV contract. They have to show all 12 of Penn State games in some shape or fashion. It's just harder. And where I struggle with it is like Penn State, like James Franklin comparing Ohio State and Michigan to Penn State in this area. Some of that is like a little bit of like animosity or clouded by the fact that Penn State hasn't really beat those teams very much over the past few years. The other part of that is like, I don't know if I just thought the comment, which was effectively like, well, Ohio State and Michigan is time protected and date protected. Why isn't the whiteout? I just don't think that it's really an apples to apples comparison at all.
Not even close.
That was my biggest takeaway there.
What was your second one? You had 2 points. Shut up and take the money, and it's not an apples to apples comparison?
The second point here is, and it's more of a question.
Oh, no, we're shut up and win the game. Sorry.
They're shut up and win the game. That was kind of point one / like the apples and oranges comparison. And I think that's kind of where this blends in. So Penn State has famously said they will not host a Friday night game because of logistic reasons, right. 100,000 people. And I get that and I respect that. And I go back and forth on Friday night games because you do get all Saturday to watch a bunch of other football as a fan. Where I see and hear and read is they're trying to figure out when they should put this whiteout game. So I guess my question to you / other fans is, in order to guarantee a whiteout game at night in Beaver Stadium on a Saturday, would you be willing to give up one of your other home game Saturdays for a Friday night game? Because that's effectively maybe what we might have to see happen to get that to happen. Because this is kind of what happened with the Michigan State game at
but Michigan State game was a Michigan State home game, so Penn State didn't give up a home game.
Right? You're not necessarily giving up a home game in this situation. You're giving up Friday, a Saturday game. Like, let's take the bull. Like,
but I think Penn State's already willing to play a Friday night game on the road instead of Saturday. That's their contribution to the TV contract.
Home. I think you'd have to give it up home. Is how I feel about it.
No, I don't know that I agree with that. So I'll go with 2 points just to keep it balanced.
Okay.
I think it is, you took the money, shut up. The TV contracts are paid. Shut up and play. Like, stop bitching about the TV networks jerking you around. They're in charge. You've agreed they're in charge because you've taken the deal. And I think the bigger thing with the whiteout that's becoming silly this year is, if it's so stinking important, schedule it. Make it your event. Schedule the agenda. The whiteout is going to be against this team on this date. Come hell or high water. It's the whiteout. If it's bigger than the game, which some people want you to believe, although we need the opponent, we need a night. But the whiteout has become bigger than the opponent and bigger the time. Schedule it. Set your promotions. Senior day is the last game of the year. When homecoming is. Pick another one and say, this is whiteout, plant your flag, and then let the networks fight over it, right? Because they will, because everybody would like to have those visuals. I mean, that said, so 2A is the whiteout doesn't drive viewership, though, either. Like, it just doesn't. Like, the matchups drive viewership, right. Which is why Michigan and Ohio State's protected. The visuals don't. It's great visual, but it doesn't drive attendance, right. Or viewership, I'm sorry. Drives attendance, not viewership.
So, and I just want to clarify to make sure I understand your point, because I think I agree with your point. You're saying, like instead of usually, everybody's antsy because we haven't got the whiteout yet, because it usually comes out.
Going to be on a 2-week window. No.
Well, and you also get it. Announced, usually like Memorial Day weekend or right around there. You're saying January 15th, or even Blue-White weekend. Before the TV schedules are even started to talk about, you're saying, we're playing Ohio State in the whiteout this year. Who cares at what time it is?
Right, and you can do it that early if you like, or even now is fine for me. Stop the worrying about it and drive the narrative yourself. The whiteout will be against UCLA or Ohio State, whichever one it is. The stripe out's going to be this game. The helmet stripe's going to be this game. All University Day is this game. Here's our stuff.
Do it. You're saying okay. So you're saying do it separate of the TV. Don't even worry about TV. Just
Right.
kind of just play the
Because
game. Yeah, I agree
it
with that.
doesn't drive TV viewership. It does drive attendance because people will come. So put them in a position to schedule it and make their visit. There has been, as Wogo mentioned before, a noon whiteout game before. Noon is the biggest game time in Big Ten going forward. It just is. So if you want your biggest game to be the whiteout, make it your biggest game. And if it ends up at noon, okay, great. That's the biggest window. More people in America are going to see that game than any other game that Saturday. If it ends up at 7:30 on NBC, decent number of people are going to see that, and it's going to look good, and you're still going to be happy. If you schedule it late in the season and it ends up 3:30 on NBC, 3:30 on CBS, still going to be dark by the second half, still going to look half decent. I just think schedule, if the event is important to you, because the other piece they said as well, other events on campus and in town are worried about what we're going to do. Okay, then be a good neighbor, schedule a date.
That's a good point. I agree with that.
Boom. This is what it is, and everybody else can schedule their stuff around it, because you are holding a lot of people hostage for something that really doesn't. It's not going to drive viewership. It's going to have the same number of cars and people coming into town, and people can prepare and get ready and get excited about, get the bitching out of their system, and then get ready to go. But you've opened up all the other community events and things that campus activities are worried about which one's going to be. Go ahead and make the decision. It's your game. That's one of the few things you control in college football anymore, would be a promotion like that. Go ahead and own it.
I don't disagree with any of this. Okay. No, I think this is about how I feel about it too. Like I hadn't thought of it that way, but I agree with that because I don't know. That was kind of why I wrote that thing like last week. Is like you're gonna like it's gonna happen. Just do it. Yeah. So I guess I hadn't thought it that deep through yet, but I agree with that. Okay. Feel good about the whiteout?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be
feel better.
excited to watch it from home whenever it happens. Unless it's homecoming weekend. Apparently, we got tickets to homecoming, so I may go. So we'll see.
He's gonna make his way into the stadium. Wow.
Yeah,
Look at that. Okay. Speaking of the stadium, there was another piece of Penn State news that we forgot to discuss the last time we had a conversation on the podcast. A moment of silence for the Beaver Stadium trough. No longer intact. No longer. It would appear there was a Facebook post going around. Looks like they're removing them. Here's a question I have for you. You have I wouldn't call it a man cave because you use the studio as also an Airbnb, correct?
Yes. Yep.
Use, but it's a little bit of a man cave. If it were possible, if one were to happen to come up on a university auction, would you buy a Beaver Stadium trough and use it for your man cave's bathroom?
No, because it wouldn't fit in the bathroom. But I hadn't thought about it till you said it. I think you could clean it and use it as a cool little display area, right? Like for tchotchkes and stuff.
I don't know. That's
require
60,
a lot of cleaning.
That is 60 years of peace.
No, it wouldn't fit in the bathroom. No, and I haven't run to salvage yet. And you know they're going to move out of salvage as soon as they're there, right?
Right.
Just because they are. I haven't. It's interesting. We didn't talk about it, but right when the semester ended, I was with some students, and I don't know how it came up. They got to talking about the troughs in the bathroom, right? Like guys and girls mixed, and the couple girls were there, like, you do what in the bathrooms? Like everybody side by side in an open. I'm like, and they were just like freaked out. And the guys were like, what's the big deal? Like, we're just going to the bath. Like, it's just, and it was interesting that the college age girls, there were like three of them in this discussion, were just like freaked out. I'm like, it's the most efficient way to get people in and out.
That is why I wanted to bring it up on this podcast, because I'm extremely anxious about bathroom lines next season.
Yeah, there's going to be, I mean, unless they're not going to be able to add as many stalls as there were places you could elbow in to go to the bathroom, right?
Exactly.
Exactly. So bathroom lines could be a thing. Who knows? I don't think I'd get permission to use it as a tchotchke area.
I don't think I would judge you a little bit. You could.
But maybe you'd almost have to buy one if you ever built a camp somewhere, or you knew somebody who needed one, right? Like
you're doing that, or our wives are gonna hate this idea, but I'm doing it. If I come across one, I'm doing this. You buy one and you make it a flower planter.
That's pretty redneck. No, that wouldn't fly here. Maybe in the backyard it could work.
Yeah,
in the backyard, not street facing. Not street facing. That one.
No,
I'm not even that brave.
No,
I'll try to run by salvage yet this week. The university's closed for Juneteenth on Wednesday, but maybe Thursday when whatever the podcast goes up or whatever, I'll try to run over there Thursday or Friday and see if any of them show up,
I
or even
just
ask the people if they got them yet.
I just think it's a thought. Um, okay, that was my other Penn State potpourri session. It was I just wanted to not I wanted to tease or make that one a surprise. There is one other thing that I'm trying to track down or maybe find out more about. So this is more of an ask. Apparently, Penn State's getting a new ribbon board. Ben Jones had tweeted about this. There's like a super
cool.
ribbon board coming to the south end zone. I don't know what that means. I guess that's probably why they moved the weather vane, so that they could like build on top of that or something. Because they took down the weather vane.
So that is them.
Um,
Makes sense.
so if anybody knows anything about that, that's more of this ask. I want to know what it's going to look like. I would. I just. I really wish
It'll have room for the out of town scores and the countdown clock out of commercials. Hopefully,
it better because or
two people in the stadium used to care about that one.
now it's one.
Now there's just one.
It's,
Yeah.
You know what though, and that's going to become even more in handy when the bathroom lines have to get longer because you're going to need to know when the longer TV breaks are if it's.
Well, they pump sound into the bathrooms, don't they?
Yeah, but we are like I'm pretty much on an aisle, so I can get down there and get going and get back up there all in about 3 minutes, which is about what the new TV breaks are taking.
It's true.
So, okay. Last thing is old guy, young guy, right? Yeah, that's the last
I
thing.
believe so.
All right, this week's old guy, young guy. It's kind of a TikTok trend, apparently. Um, it's not that scary. I want to know, Mr. Samsel, what is the proper height of socks?
Depends on what socks you have.
No, it doesn't depend on what
Dress
socks
socks, you mean?
you
Like,
are. You okay? Let me rephrase. You are. You're gonna go tonight, and you're gonna go to the grocery store, and you're wearing sneakers. You're wearing sneakers. What is
I'm wearing ankle socks in the summer.
and
Like
and when you say ankle socks, that means that you can
like
see
they're
most
level
of the
with it. You can
sock.
see an edge of the sock, right?
Okay,
On the
so that's
left and
like a
right.
borderline no-show sock to me. You're
Yeah, it's borderline.
okay. All right.
Not totally no show because those things slip and you don't have any sock on inside your shoe and they get bunched up down there.
Yeah, I have like
So just slightly show socks for me in the summer.
okay. I have a just slightly below ankle sock. I guess would be that's usually
Yeah,
what I
I've seen
wear.
those. Yeah.
Um,
What is the TikTok trend? Are we trending
well,
lower or
apparently,
higher?
like my generation, not your generation. I don't know what your generation's wearing. Probably those like the like varicose vein ones or
Right, I was just gonna say that the
those ones,
compression socks, right? Yeah, yeah.
compression socks. Apparently, I think like because like my socks because they don't show that's out of style, and then Gen Z is like their socks show. I don't know. I haven't quite fully understood the
Oh, they're
TikTok
bringing them
trend.
back to the. It's like anything, like skirt lengths, right? They get longer and shorter, and sock lengths
Yeah.
get longer and shorter. So, I've had. I think when I was in high school in like the '80s, when North Carolina was really good at basketball, well, they've always been good at basketball. When they had like Jeff Lebo and those guys, like you would have like the high sneakers, you'd have the high top sneakers, but then you'd push the socks down so they were bunched up, and that was the athletic looking sock when we were playing basketball. But yeah, I'm usually short sock, not totally no see. You can see a little bit.
Okay.
And then dress socks are like higher because you don't
Well,
see them,
yeah,
and they do
yeah.
kind of keep that circulation going in there for my old legs. So yeah,
Well, I don't know. And when you wear, let me ask, I have another question. This is more a curiosity question, not a TikTok trend question. When you wear boots, like when you wear like your like boots, like not steel toes, but like your Tims or like
hmm
duck boots, what's your sock length there?
they're like calf height or just
Okay,
under
that's
calf
what I
height,
wear.
enough to
Okay,
cover the yeah.
I just want to make sure
Yeah.
that we were on the same page
Yeah.
then. Okay, that's it. That's
Look at
all.
that.
I'll
You
ask.
got old guy socks, old guy sock habits. That's not good for you. You're not ready for that yet.
They don't. But apparently that's what the youths are telling me.
That's what the youths are telling you.
Um, okay, that's this week's show. Thanks to Wogo for joining us. That was a great conversation. All right, housekeeping. I don't think we're gonna sneak in an episode before next week. I don't know. Steve might surprise me. Maybe we will. If we are, great. I'm excited about it. I could do it Monday or Tuesday because Wednesday I leave for Europe. I'm gonna go see a singer over there. I don't know if you ever heard of her, Steve. Quite excited about that. Her name's Taylor Swift.
I've heard. I'm excited
Um,
for you.
um, and then I will be on a European vacation. So we will probably, if we record next week, we'll have that episode. But then if not, it will probably be that second full week of July, maybe in there. And then, like a week later, 2 weeks later, we start really talking about football a lot more, which is great. I haven't, the preview mags are starting to come out. I haven't purchased one yet. We'll wait till after the trip, I think, this year. Um, anyways, that's a long-winded way of saying I don't know how much content we're going to put on the blog or on the podcast. I don't know if we'll do a newsletter this month. Just a lot going on right now. It's kind of a hectic period. But July we'll pick up kind of back to our normal groove. And we've got some exciting things planned. A couple guests we want to have on. And then we've also got, football stuff to write about. Oh, and then I have pretty much finalized the new stuff designs. So there's going to be a new batch of stuff this year coming out as we get a little closer. So, anything else, Mr. Samsel? Oh, we didn't talk about your spreadsheet. Thank you for sharing your spreadsheet. I hope you check out your spreadsheet.
Yeah, for those people out there checking it out, that was like my life's work. That was, I'm going to still keep updating it. And that was, I think it's cool. Like, it's good to have those answers, right? Like, it's good to know, hey, when did this happen for game times and stuff like that? And now that it's there, I'm going to go back and do some time of game stuff updates just that is there that I didn't keep that you kept. I think it's a cool thing to have. So no, I think it's glad it's out there.
There's a lot of fun you can have with it. I used it for writing about the whiteout. I filtered it out so that you could look at I determined. So there was the game at noon, and then I think there was a 3:30 whiteout, which I think was Alabama. I think those are the only two before 5 p.m. Starting time. So yeah, I don't know if you'll ever really I don't know if it's a great bar trivia thing.
Right.
I think it's the best way to put it. So
no, it was for me, it was to be able to go back and say, this is the 12th game that this broadcast team has done together over Penn State, and their record in those games is 5-6 or something like that, So
I think that'll be fun. So that's a good resource to have. Did you like the graphic that I made it look like a?
I did. It was pretty cool.
Okay, yeah. I was excited about that.
Looked old school.
What else did we put on the blog? Oh, I just updated the coaching tree. That's about it.
And I'll have a farewell to Learfield thing for you before you leave.
Oh, right. That's right. Yes, because
we'll have that.
And did you see the case got settled? I guess they settled out of court. I don't know if you saw that.
Oh no, I didn't see that.
That weird because they were upset about the RFP process,
right.
Which just kind of seemed like a last ditch effort to grab.
Yeah, no, they were just trying to figure. Yeah.
Sorry, not to put that bluntly, but to put that bluntly, that's the way I thought about it. So it would be weird to not hear the Learfield Sports Network when you listen in.
Yeah, I have a short list of things you're going to miss. I'm going to try to write about that and then contextualize. I think PlayFi's in a pretty good position to make some money. Athletics expects them to make money, but with on-field ads coming and whatever else, it's a pretty good time to be a new partner.
Yeah, I think so too. Anything else? Anything else housekeeping?
Nope. Thumbs up down there.
Oh, you were getting us out of here.
I'm jumping in. Yeah.
Oh my gosh! All right. 5 stars, thumbs up. You can like and subscribe there. Steve really wants to end the show. He must have to go to the bathroom or something.
What guy?
Go to Beaver Stadium Trough pretty soon. Coming home to the Samsel family. Other than that, websites, stuffsummersays.com. On that website, there's a section called with
Steve.
Email Darian at stuffsummersays.com. Steve's is
Steve at stuffsummersays.com.
My Twitter handle is at stuffsummersays. Steve's is
at Steve Samsel.
See ya. Bye.